Okay, and then I need to share, Wes, y'all are doing leading the presentation from your end, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm going to make sure you can do that. Okay. Okay, great. Well, I'll just start by welcoming everybody. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Tanya Wise with Wise Resource Development. We have a couple of our team members, Heather Quinn and Brittany Bannon, on the call. We have a couple of other team members that couldn't make it today, so they're going to watch the recording. But we're really excited to be part of this initiative. The South Dallas Employment Project, I think, has a lot of great power behind it as a collaborative that's really focused on some terrific impact in South Dallas around reentry and helping people be successful with reentry. And I know Wes can explain this project better than I can, but we were invited to participate in this by somebody that y'all may know, Francois Booker Drew from State Fair of Texas. And so, you know, anytime she asks people to get involved, it's you know, a quick yes. I have great amount of respect for her. And so we're very excited to engage in this project. Each one of our team members will sit on a committee and we'll be supporting this project through some grant writing and then also providing some free workshops for the collaborative partners just around different areas of fundraising and just providing some tips and best practices and things like that. So that's how we're going to start getting involved. And then we hope to have a deeper engagement with this project. And because it is so far reaching and there's just so many different ways that reentry impacts the community, different support systems that need to be in place for people that are, you know, returning from incarceration. We felt like it made sense for us to introduce this collaborative to our clients. And so we're thankful for you to be on this call to learn about this. If you have any questions as follow-up, I know Wes would be happy to answer those questions, but this is a great opportunity for lots of people to get a quick download and to hear about this great project from Wes. So thank you for participating on the call. And we really appreciate you and everything that you do to make our community better. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wes so he can start with the presentation.
Tanya, first, thank you for the opportunity to share with both your clients and staff the work we're doing through the South Dallas Employment Project. As a very brief background introduction, for those of you who don't know me, I've spent the last 52 years in nonprofit organizational management, concurrently serving in a variety of appointed positions in state and federal agencies. Most recently served 2 6-year terms as chairman of the state's workforce system, which oversees 8 state agencies that are funded in part by the Department of Labor funding and Department of Education funding. And a lot of what we're doing in the project came out of a lot of those experiences. And I know we talk a lot about people coming out of incarceration, but more broadly, we're talking in this project about what we're calling opportunity populations. And one of my comments to employers is to say, do you understand that disadvantaged populations, opportunity populations, make up more than 1/3 of the adult workforce in the state? And if you're not open to giving a second chance to people who are considered challenged, marginalized, disadvantaged, then you've taken off the table 1/3 of all working age Texans who might feel you're unmet demand for jobs. And it's a perception changer, but I'm using the term opportunity because I've said to them, you have a real opportunity to both fill the jobs you need to fill, because we're going to provide you trained, skilled, competent job seekers. But at the same time, you have an opportunity to help them move into leading a very sustainable life. So I'm pleased that all of you have interest in the work we're doing. And we'll begin. Okay, Lily, first slide. This project launched in February of 2020. So in effect, we're about 14 months old. Tanya mentioned Francois Booker Drew. I met her in 2019 when she found out that I had created Redemption Bridge, a nonprofit intermediary focused on building new models in Texas to serve these populations. And she wanted to know if I would assist her in putting together a one-day job fair for people coming out of incarceration. Of course, we committed to do that. And the more she and I talked, the more she said, I love the idea of the models you're building. Could you do something in South Dallas? I said, what would you like to do? She said something significant. This is a food desert, a healthcare desert. It's challenged in so many ways. It has the highest incarceration rate in the state. And she went on to cite statistics, some of which surprised me, some of which I knew. And I said, well, why don't we develop the model in your 5 contiguous zip codes? And so this project in February 2020 began 10 nonprofits Francois recruited to meet at her office, and several major partners I was already working with, primarily the Dallas Independent School District, Dallas College, UNT, University of North Texas at Dallas, and Region 10 Educational Services. Those 14 parties met at her office. We laid out a vision and said, we're going to think about and build a very collaborative approach to serving these populations. Will you go on this journey with us? And out of those 14 who committed, we now have 102 formal partners who have committed to this project who are working with us. But we have a premise for this. First, that we're going to build a sustainable, replicable, and scalable model. Frankly, I've seen too many projects that began with a grant. And they did well as long as the grant funds were there. But once the grant funds were exhausted, the project fell apart because we really didn't take the time to build sustainability into the initiative. We didn't think about how we're going to sustain funding the initiative once the grant fund runs out. And sometimes we don't think to document what we're doing to make sure it's going to be replicable. If we can do it in South Dallas, can we do it in East Dallas? Can we do it in Houston? Can we do it on the US-Mexico border? And lastly, is it scalable? Often projects are developed and they do an incredible job of serving 50 kids, but it's hard to scale them up to serve 500 or 5,000. And so we had those 3 things in mind. And we are talking about building what we're calling collaborative community capacity through public-private partnerships. And one premise, one thing I've said to every one of those 102 partners is before we bring you in as a partner, I want to understand what your own organizational goals are, because I know that you will not stay involved with this work unless we're helping you meet your own goals through this collaborative approach. But if we can show you, if we can demonstrate to you that your goals can be more effectively met by working in a collaborative manner, then I know you'll stay with us and we'll all succeed. Next slide, please. So in a sense, 2 things, a holistic model assisting opportunity populations to lead sustainable lives focused on 5 contiguous zip codes. And I'll hasten to add, we're not committed to only ever serve those 5. We needed a starting point. And we needed a starting point that was managed, that organizations could look within and say, okay, we can do that within these 5 zip codes, rather than saying we're going to do this throughout Dallas County. But one of our emerging goals is over time, we hope this will be spreading throughout Dallas County. And currently aligning and integrating. I want you to think about those 2 words. How do you align and integrate the resources of 100+ organizational partners in ways that enhance everyone's ability to do what they're business to do? Next slide, please. What are we really doing? Well, look at the 7 committees that represent our 7 strategic areas of focus. As we were building the current state 8-year plan for the 8 agencies in the workforce system, one of the things we looked at was, what do these populations really need? I've never forgotten Brian Collier, who was then and still is leading the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. He said, Wes, I'm going to tell you what they need. When we let people out of prison in Texas, the number one thing they need when they get back to wherever they're going back to is a living wage job. I'm going to tell you that no one is going to go back and accept a minimum wage job if they've been making $1,000 a week selling crack. They're just not going to do it. And they're going to fall back in with the people they got into trouble with, doing the things that got them arrested, and I'm going to get it back. They need a living wage job to start with, and then they have an opportunity to deal with all the other issues of housing, transportation, health, wellness, and recovery issues, reconnectivity into their community, digital access, inclusion, literacy needed. Many of them come out of prison not really knowing how to operate modern day computer software programs. And lastly, there's public policy issues. And so, in essence, the structure of our project is that we have 7 standing committees. And the names of those committees are on your screen. And the name of the committee is also one of our 7 strategic goals. How do we ensure that those populations are able to secure living wage employment? Who does what by when to enable that? How do we help them find affordable housing? How do we help them gain transportation assistance? How do we help them with their health, wellness, and recovery issues? We're working with all the major healthcare providers at this point, and they've all cited that they serve people in their emergency rooms all the time for issues that have really a basis in something other than health. They said, we treat people for symptoms that are basically due to homelessness or due to the lack of food or the lack of wages to eat healthy meals. They've talked about all of the underlying causes and they've said, can we write prescriptions to the people in the ER, refer them to the South Dallas Employment Project and say, this individual, we're writing them a prescription for living wage employment and recovery from addiction services. Can you connect them? And that's one of the goals we have. The Federal Department of Prisons tell you, the Federal Department of Prisons will tell you the 3 factors most critical to recidivism: the lack of ability to reconnect into a community and gain a positive peer influence is one of the top 3 reasons people fall back into recidivism. So in essence, you see the 7 things we're focused on doing. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about what this area looks like. You see our 5 contiguous zip codes. There are 239,911 residents, of which 102,000 some are employed. 58% basically of the population is Black and 40% Hispanic. And you see the per capita income in those 5 zip codes at its lowest is $11,921. The highest is $28,12. Hardly a living wage. And I'll make a point later in the presentation, but I'll also make it now. A starting salary in a logistics center in South Dallas is about $32,000 a year. You see, that's 50% more than the highest per capita income currently in the area. And you can gain a certified logistics technician certification in about 80 hours of study and work. Well, frankly, that could be earned if you want to apply yourself in 2 weeks. And there are thousands of jobs available in those centers. We'll talk more about that. Look at the poverty level in those zip codes. It's as high as 38%. One zip code has 70% of the families living there as single parent families. No high school diploma, 22.9 to 44.7% of the population. And these are the highs and lows based on looking at each zip code. And the population with a degree as low as 7.2% in one zip code. The highest is only 22.5%. Lily, next slide. We also know that the effects of COVID-19 have impacted this area, challenges to our nonprofit partners regarding their services delivery. Educational challenges, less than half of the families have an internet connection whatsoever. And education through the Dallas Independent School District is largely delivered online. And so there are school buses sitting in parking lots so school children can get access to Wi-Fi to do their homework. But we've got to resolve those kinds of challenges. And lack of living wage employment. As we said, the top per capita wage is basically $10 an hour. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about social equity and race-based issues. I've cited that 1 in 3 working age Texans have a record. And for every 100,000 individuals, the incarceration rate, if you're white, only 694 per 100,000 are incarcerated. For Hispanic, it's 1,152. And if you're Black, it's 3,734 for every 100,000. Our Black population is 39% of the prison population, but only 12% of the general population. When I became chairman, I was told there were over 1,000 laws in Texas impeding employment for justice-involved populations. And recidivism, if we define it as rearrested within 3 years of release, and you'll find when you hear me quote a statistic, I'm always going to tell you how it's defined, because I can define it in a way to make that number as low as 23%. But the brutal reality is, if you define recidivism as someone rearrested within 3 years of release, 68% are going to be rearrested. And look at your bottom line. There are more than 30,000 non-duplicated individuals being released annually into Dallas County from county, state, and federal prisons. And then think about the fact that 68% of 30,000 are going to be rearrested within 3 years, more than half of those in the first year. Next slide, please. And so we've started with 4 targeted employment sectors. We've started with these sectors for 2 reasons. They have significant unmet demand, actually 3 reasons. You can become employable in all 4 of those sectors by earning a nationally recognized industry certification that is typically between 80 to 160 hours. It's not 2 semesters, it's not a 2-year degree. It's sometimes a 1-month process to earn a nationally recognized industry certification. And look at those 4 sectors. Those are the current jobs available within the southern half of Dallas County right now in those 4 sectors. And every one of them pays a living wage to begin. And every one of them pays what I'm starting to call a sustainable wage in a reasonable amount of time. We use logistics to start with. So think of logistics jobs starting at about $32,000 a year, but enabling you to reach $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and even $80,000 a year in a reasonable amount of time. And in just those 4 sectors, we're looking at over 20,000 jobs available today, if you have the basic skills and competencies needed to become employed in one of those sectors. Next slide, please. This is a little bit of how we're organized. You can see that Redemption Bridge and the State Fair of Texas are in the middle of the chart. Francois Booker Drew is my other managing partner. The 2 of us have made a long-term commitment to manage the project. And this isn't a 1 or a 2-year project. I've told people this is at least a 10-year project. You see along the far right, the facilities we're working with to facilitate the pre-release services and post-release services to individuals incarcerated. You see some of what we call our primary partners inside, just to the right, the City of Dallas, Region 10 Education Service Center, Dallas College, Dallas ISD, University of North Texas, and the North Central Texas Council of Governments. You see our 7 committees and the blocks on the left. And then you see above the State Fair and Redemption Bridge, we have 3 meetings monthly. We have an advisory council, and that means all 102 current partners are invited to a meeting once a month, in which we make sure that we've kept everyone updated on all the things that are happening within the project. We have a steering committee that's comprised of the chairman of those 7 committees working with us to coordinate the work of the committees. And we have an executive committee comprised of the primary partners. And as again, those are like the City of Dallas, major entities who can provide significant resources and support everyone working within the project. And the bottom line represents the fact that we're continually evaluating both what we need to do next, what we've done, how effective it's been, measuring progress, looking at what needs to happen into the future. And we're working on a state-local integration among state agencies, regional integration, and local implementation. So that gives you a little sense. People sometimes need a pictorial representation. So that gives you a little sense about how we've arrayed the partners. Next slide, please. Here again is a little explanation of that meeting structure for you. And I understand that this slideshow is available to all of you following the presentation. So you've got it as a reference and a resource. Next slide, please. And I'll give you a little flavor of what we're actually doing. We talk about digital equality. Well, we're certainly working on enhancing areas, providing hotspots in areas so people have Wi-Fi connectivity, providing digital literacy training. But we've just finalized an agreement with the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. They've agreed to retain Magellan Consultants. They're a national company that does a lot of work on strategic planning for digital access and resolving the digital divide. It's a 3-year process. Magellan is under contract to work with us for the next 3 years. The deliverable is a truly defined strategic plan to ensure digital access, literacy, and equality within the area. Another one of the deliverables is that they will define what it will take to fund that plan and implement it. And then they will work with us to secure the funding to ensure the implementation of the plan. And we're launching that in May. Living wage, the city of Dallas has just sent us literally the contact information for 20,000 plus employers who do business with the city of Dallas, and the city and Redemption Bridge, South Dallas Employment Project of the State Fair are getting ready to reach out to all 20,000 of them, asking them to engage as employers in the project, to guarantee interviews to the people we send them, and to work with us to provide greater support for this overall initiative to reach the employment challenges and needs of that area. We're working with the City of Dallas, the Dallas Housing Authority, the Texas Association for Housing Development, a national entity called the Home Builders Alliance, an arm of the National Association of Home Builders who provides training, and many others to put together a true strategic plan to develop affordable housing in these 5 zip codes. We're working with the Council of Governments. They're helping us build a true infrastructure development plan because we recognize there's a lack of transit options and in many cases, a lack of transportation infrastructure. Please understand the Council of Governments is the primary linkage to both the Texas Department of Transportation funding and the U.S. Department of Transportation funding. And so once the Council of Governments completes that work, they're going to be working with us to go to the state and federal agencies and see if we can't get that plan funded. Then if you look at connectivity, we're beginning to work with what we're going to call pilot projects. And within those pilot projects, we're going to start working with all of our referral partners to have them send us a limited number of referrals. We've spent a year doing our strategic plan. Now we're moving into the true implementation of the project. And so I'll give you one example. Management Training Corporation operates 10 prisons in Texas under contract with TDCJ, Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Their prisons house people who are going to be released within 2 years. They spend a great deal of time training them. In fact, we've been working with them to make sure that they're offering the industry certifications that matter so that hopefully you can come out of prison having already earned the certification. And once you've earned that certification, then we can help you find employment instead of trying to figure out how we're going to get you trained so we can then work with you on employment. But they release thousands of people a year. They house about 20,000. But one of their facilities in East Texas houses the people who have been committed for 45 and 90-day treatment programs within the prison system. They're willing to refer everybody coming out of their prisons moving back to Dallas to us. The challenge we need to first face is, one, we need to know that we're prepared to deal with that we've got a system in place so that if we got 500 individuals referred to us tomorrow, we'd be able to adequately work with them to pre-register them for housing needs or pre-register them with an addictive treatment facility or pre-register them for public transportation, special assistance, or whatever the needs may be. And so you see that a part of our goal is working with all those institutions, the city and county specialty courts, the county, state, and federal prisons to say, when people are coming out, we're happy for you to refer them to us. And then we're going to connect them with some of our 102 partners pre-release so that when they come out, they know that where they're going to sleep that night. They're already enrolled in a training program at Dallas College. They're already have a map that shows them where public transit can get them to the interviews we're setting up for them. And so in May, we begin testing that system with a limited number of referrals. On the healthcare side, we've now succeeded in getting commitments from every major healthcare provider in Dallas County: Parkland Hospital, UT Southwestern Medical Center, Texas Health Resources, Scott Baylor White, and so on. All of them are beginning to work with us to form a hospital council. And the purpose of that council is to finally bring all of those major healthcare providers together to truly collaborate to develop a strategic approach to resolving the healthcare desert that is within those 5 counties. And the simple question we're posing is, what can each of you do, either individually or collectively as a collaborative approach, to bring greater healthcare services to and within those 5 cities? And lastly, public policy. One of the areas we've committed to is to look at public policy from the perspective of what are the policies that are inhibitive, and what are policies we could propose that would be impactful and supportive. As one example, we're now working with a coalition in Texas to promote Clean Slate. Clean Slate is very simple in its approach. It says we should, in the states in our country, be proposing legislation that says if you were convicted of a minor nonviolent offense, you ought to have a chance to clean your slate, to expunge your record at some point in time so it doesn't follow you around forever. 3 states have adopted Clean Slate as an initiative to date. It's a fairly new, nascent initiative. We are a part of a coalition in Texas pursuing that with the state legislature. We are being encouraged. And it was something like a legislator just saying, okay, if you've been out for 5 years, no rearrests, no reincarceration, you've maintained employment, you've kept your record clean, then you can become automatically eligible to apply to expunge your record. Right now, the only way you can get an expungement is to hire an attorney, spend several $1,000s, and there's no guarantee you'll get that expungement. But under the Clean Slate initiative, the concept is if you meet criteria established by the state, then you can apply and automatically you are eligible to have your record expunged without having to spend thousands of dollars to hire an attorney. And just the fact that we're getting positive response from even business organizations and fairly far right-leaning public policy think tanks is encouraging. And so we're hopeful that we can continue to do that kind of work. But I wanted to give you a sense of at least one key project from each of these 7 committees relative to our strategic goals and our strategic approaches. Next slide, please. So I know that's a cursory overview. We could go deeply in depth and probably spend 2 or 3 hours. But what Tanya and I had hoped we could do this morning is at least give you a flavor of the project, give you a sense of what it's about, and leave some time for any questions you may want to pose. Certainly, when we bring on partners, you're not making a financial commitment and you're not making a long-term legal commitment. What we ask of partners is 3 things. Tell us you understand the meaning of the term collaborate in its truest sense. Tell us you're willing to sign a simple memorandum of agreement that acknowledges that you've agreed you're going to be a part of a collaborative approach to work in this area of South Dallas. And third, write a simple letter of support. Actually, just put the letter of support we drafted on your letterhead, because we're doing collaborative fundraising. And so, as we've said, we work to grow the capacity of every partner. Tanya said at the outset, she's going to provide some forums for all of our partners to help them learn to become more effective fundraisers. And we're helping them find grant opportunities where, for example, if there's a project a committee is focused on and it aligns with funding we know about, then our goal is to secure grant funding that can be distributed and shared with all of the partners working with us on that project. So all of them have more resources to work with, one more way of growing their capacity. So that's really about as hard as it gets to become a partner in this initiative. We do an intake. We talk about your goals. We talk about what you're trying to achieve as an organization. And we want to make sure that we can define how specifically your engagement in this project will be helpful to you in meeting your own goals. So That's pretty much our overview. I'm happy to answer questions if any of you have them. We can have an interactive dialogue or discussion for the rest of the time we've scheduled. So I guess, Tanya, I should come back to you as the moderator and let you guide us through the remainder of the time we have together this morning.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Wes. You have always such a great, thorough explanation of the project. And as I mentioned earlier, we are really excited to be part of this. You know, when we reached out to Dr. Booker Drew about how we can have a greater impact in South Dallas, and she brought us this opportunity, I really see that this has a lot of power behind it. So, you know, we're hoping that we can be part of this great impact. So I'm curious to see if anybody has questions, thoughts that you might want to share or ask while we have Wes's time.
Hi, Wes. My name is Isaac Buren. I'm with Harmony CDC. I just wanted to make sure, are the clients that you serve required to have been formerly incarcerated, or can you help everybody?
No, we're helping everybody.
Okay.
Our goal is that if you live or returning to those 5 zip codes, it doesn't matter whether you were incarcerated or not, whether you're homeless, whether you're just underemployed, whether you're under addictive treatment, whether you're challenged, you came back to the area having lived somewhere else and you're still dealing with poverty, any population whatsoever, we're happy to work with.
And I think the great thing about such a powerful collective group of partners is just the ability to overcome all the barriers that opportunity populations have.
This is Candy from Harmony. Is there any plan to expand those zip codes? So we're farther south.
The short answer is yes. Let me tell you why we started with 5. Number one, we knew that if we went to any of these organizations and said, let's start providing service throughout Dallas County, they'd look at it as overwhelming. But we said, let's start in 5 zip codes. Now, let's go back to my first explanation when I said, we want this to be sustainable, replicable, and scalable. And our goal, once we got this project going forward, was to say, once we've institutionalized it, once all of our partners are simply working together in a collaborative manner, then we can begin expanding the footprint very easily. But we knew we had to get all of these procedures put together. And we had to get the organizations used to working with each other in manners that they hadn't previously done so. But if you've got clients that could be referred to these partners, we're happy to do that.
Any other questions?
Hi, Wes. This is Wayne Sims, principal at Cornerstone Crossroads Academy.
Yes,
I have a question. So I have a few students who, a lot of my students, one, they fall into this demographic, haven't been formerly incarcerated or currently going through the system. And a lot of them are very transient. So I have some who have lived in South Dallas, but have recently moved. I wanted to make sure that those individuals will still qualify. And also, we're currently rebranding to incorporate more high school equivalency training in addition to high school diplomas. And I wanted to see if you saw any need for something like that with this particular movement.
Well, one thing I do know is that our high school population drops out at a rate higher than we like to acknowledge. I've made presentations to business groups and shocked them when I've said, I'm going to make 2 statements that are both accurate. The high school graduation rate in Texas is in the high 90 percentile. And the high school graduation rate in Texas is in the 60 percentile. And they all look at me like I'm daft. And I said, now, Let me define both of those numbers. Remember, I said earlier in my presentation, how do you define your number? That's very important. If I define a high school graduation rate as 12th graders graduating 9 months later after entering the 12th grade, it's in the high 90s. But if I define the high school graduation rate as 9th graders entering the 9th grade who will graduate in 4 years, it's in the 60s. And when people say, well, I just don't think that's possible. And I've said, okay, tell me why. In all the demographic studies you look at, you'll see that 35 to 44% of the adult working age population does not have a high school diploma. So if we're really graduating 97% of all the kids who ever enter public education, how could we possibly have an adult population in which about 40% don't have a high school diploma? Tell me that. That can't all be people who moved here from Oklahoma and California. It just can't be. So one of my beliefs is that if high school students understand that you could earn an industry certification while in high school, and when you leave high school without any college needed, you could go to work at $30,000 or $40,000 a year to start. I think more of them would stay. But I don't know that they understand those occupations that actually pay that. I know I was making a presentation to a rural public school system. And even the superintendent and his CTE director said, Wes, would you mind explaining to our 10th graders what logistics really is? We're not sure how to explain it. And so I know that part of the challenge is we need to help our public schools more effectively understand what modern day logistics or modern day manufacturing production is, because there are still those old blue collar perceptions lingering. And so my presentation was to show a 2-minute film clip of Bell Helicopter's unmanned autonomous taxi. In fact, I asked the students, do any of you ever seen or heard of the Jetsons cartoon? Believe it or not, most of them raised their hand. I said, do you remember George Jetson's spaceship? I mean, it took him to work every day. He got on it. He didn't have to drive it. It took him to work. I said, well, now I want to show you a film strip because Bell Helicopter has actually created the George Jetson spacecraft. And it's going to be pilot tested in Dallas-Fort Worth in the next 2 to 3 years. And I showed them the 2-minute clip and they were stunned. I said, now, think about the people who developed the enabling technologies. Think about the people who engineered the development of that system. Think about the people who taught it how to fly without a pilot. And I went through that litany. I said, now, how many of you have a cell phone? Y'all raised their hand. I said, how many of you have ordered from Amazon? Y'all raised their hand. I said, all right, who developed the app that enabled you to do that? Who developed the algorithms behind the app that make it work? By the time I'd walked them through every process that had to happen before that package got dropped at their door by an Amazon Prime truck, I said, now everything we've just talked about is logistics. Because at its heart and soul, logistics is moving people, product, and information from point A to point B. And if you want to start in logistics, you can make 30 to 40,000 starting if you'll enroll in the certification program the school's going to offer next year. And the superintendent told me we had over 100 kids sign up after they heard that. Well, I think a part of it is we've got to be more effective in getting the information out to our schools about what these careers really are, what students would really do. It's not sitting there loading boxes manually on a truck. It's not screwing the bolt on the car. You go in the GM plant in Arlington, it's highly sophisticated robotics driven by sophisticated computers. And there's no one really on the assembly line. The robotics are running the assembly line. And the people running the robotics are behind computers running the robotics. So I think we've got to help high school students understand that there can be very well-paying careers that don't require 1 day of college. And I think that's a key to retention and upping the true graduation rate.
That's a great explanation. Thanks, Wes. Any other questions for Wes? So, oh, Candy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think too, Wes, that also applies to even what many of us are doing is having to work with people right now with this whole loss of jobs during COVID, is trying to help people understand that there are job opportunities out there, and how do we help you retool to take advantage of job opportunities that still exist. There's new job opportunities as a result of COVID, but people have got to retool and get equipped to be able to capitalize on them through certification programs.
Well, I'll give you a couple of statements that may surprise you. Pre-COVID, there were more job openings in the United States than there were job seekers. And in the midst of COVID, there are still an incredible number of unmet job demand. Go back to the numbers I put on the screen just for Dallas County in 4 sectors. And the reason behind that is the job seekers don't have the skills and competencies those jobs are looking for. A modern logistics and distribution center includes people operating drones, flying around within the center, picking up packages, dropping them on conveyor belts, automatically loading them on the truck. And those centers are under such incredible pressure that they really can't afford to hire someone without any skills whatsoever and then try to spend weeks training them to become productive. They are on such an incredible schedule that the inland port in South Dallas is approaching 80 distribution centers. And FedEx told me, we're trying to hire people, lots of people. And I'm told, call the workforce board, call the college, call DISD, call. He says, I don't even have time to make 12 calls to fill those jobs. We are under such a pressure to get product out the door that I don't know how to call. And so what we're saying to these companies, we're engaging employers to say, we will send you skilled, certified job seekers. We want you to guarantee interviews. So you don't have to make a call. Tell us what you need. If you're trying to hire 8 forklift drivers today, then we're going to say to our 102 partners, FedEx needs 8 trained, skilled forklift drivers. Get us resumes, we'll get them to FedEx, they'll interview them. And so if you're dealing or treating or serving people that need employment opportunities and you aren't prepared to provide the training, you can refer them to us and we'll get them enrolled in training. Because that's a part of our living wage employment work that we're doing. We've got for-profit training providers, nonprofit training providers, Dallas College, DISD working with Challenge Youth 18 to 24. There's hardly anybody you can refer to us that we don't have a partner that can train. We have high school equivalency programs that people can enroll in that are pre-funded. Dallas College has pre-funding for the programs they're doing. So if you want to just refer people to us, we're going to be in a position to help get them enrolled in training that can lead to some of these living wage job opportunities. In fact, Lily, you probably ought to put the last slide up, because I'm happy for any of you to reach out to me and communicate and see what we can do to support the work you're doing, whether you're in the zip codes or not. I think, Tanya, you're making the PowerPoint available to everybody on the presentation, correct?
Yes, so we'll share the PowerPoint, a recording of this, and then I'll also reshare the executive summary. I don't know if y'all have had a chance to read through that as well. It's really also comprehensive to explain the project. So if we don't have any other questions, I just want to thank Wes. Thank you for your time and for your leadership in this project. I think, as I keep mentioning, we're just really excited to be involved and excited to share this opportunity with our clients. As I mentioned, we have several of our clients that are already involved, but this is just such a terrific opportunity for many more clients to be involved. And so we just love to share this with you and see how you can be served and help through this initiative as well. So
Well, thank you, Tanya, for the opportunity. I want to thank all of you who are on this call. And again, feel free to reach out to me if you believe we can be of any help to you.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I'll follow up soon. Thanks so much, Wes. Have a good
All
rest
right.
of the day, everyone.